Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to all attending the session on coping with anxiety. I am Christine Kritzas and I'm a counseling psychologist at Lighthouse Arabia, and I look forward to spending the next hour with all of you speaking about such a pertinent subject as anxiety, especially during a time like this where we collectively continue to face a world pandemic. And we are going to be spending the hour together. And just a bit of general housekeeping before we get started. I will be taking you through understanding a little bit more about why we might be feeling this way, and then looking at some of the causes of anxiety, looking at how anxiety shows up in the physical body and how it impacts on the brain functioning as well. And then looking at some of the signs and symptoms around anxiety so that you are able to detect if you are struggling with anxiety or if your loved one may be going through an episode themselves. And then I will be walking you guys through what to do. So taking away some evidence-based strategies for dealing with anxiety during a time like this. And so for those of you who have just joined, welcome to the session on coping with anxiety. My name is Christine Kritzas and I'm a counseling psychologist at Lighthouse Arabia. And I look forward to speaking with all of you around the topic of anxiety. And I would say I'm well acquainted with the subject for two reasons. The first reason being that over the past 14 years that I've been working in private practice, I would say I've worked quite extensively with individuals struggling with anxiety, from adults through to children, as well as families in distress. And the second reason I would say I'm well acquainted with the subject of anxiety is that I have my own relationship with it. And ever since I was a little kid, I struggled myself when it came to dealing with anxiety. So rest assured, what I'm going to be sharing with you here today and the tools that I will be sharing with you here today are anchored in professional as well as personal experience. So let's get started. Let's look at what we are faced with at the moment. We are collectively continuing to be faced with a world pandemic. We are in 2022 and we know that cases of Omicron are still quite rife. We know that we are still faced with uncertainty. We know that we still face some social isolation, that many of us need to stay at home and quarantine, or we may have been a close contact to someone, so we have to stay at home. We also know that plans keep changing. And what we know about change is that anxiety loves to feed off of change, right? So that's a lot of why we may be feeling the way we feel at the moment. And so let's just look at what anxiety is. I think this idea that you either have it or you don't should be put to rest, because we all experience anxiety in varying degrees. And we wouldn't be human if we didn't experience anxiety. And thank goodness we do, because it actually keeps us safe. It is in our wiring. It is not a bad feeling. You know, we often say that sadness and anger and guilt and fear and anxiety are bad feelings. They're not bad feelings. They are difficult feelings, but they are part of our feelings repertoire. And we need to get comfortable with these difficult feelings. So understanding that anxiety falls on a continuum where we've got normal worry on the one side of the continuum and we have panic attacks and clinical anxiety on the other side of the continuum. And so what we need to understand is that it's normal that you may worry if you have a deadline at work in the next week. It's normal that you worry if you are delivering a presentation for Happy UAE today. It's normal if you worry that you ordered a dress online and 6 weeks later it still hasn't arrived. True story, I did that once and I will say that I'm not the best when it comes to online shopping. So these are things that are normal responses to the stressor at hand. It's normal that you may worry if you were planning to go and visit family and your flight got cancelled. Okay? But we need to know when it starts moving into the red zone, when it starts looking like a panic attack, when it starts interfering with our day-to-day functioning. And what we also need to be aware of is that when our coping mechanisms are outweighed by our stresses, right? When we experience more stresses than what we have the ability to cope with it, that we are more vulnerable to experiencing an episode of anxiety. So, what happens in the physical body when we are anxious? I want to spend some time speaking about the fight or flight stress response system. And the pandemic has activated all of our fight or flight stress response systems to varying degrees. Now, what is the fight or flight stress response system? It is our body's inbuilt defense mechanism. It is something that keeps us safe. It helps us detect threat and danger. It alerts us to the fact that if a big brown bear were to be charging us, we would need to run. Now, present day, that big brown bear might be just sitting in a board meeting with your senior colleague and he says that the client wasn't happy with your work, or finding yourself late for an appointment, right? Our fight or flight stress response system can be activated in many ways, and Professor Robert Sapolsky from Stanford University, who's done a lot of research on the topic of stress, explains how human beings are the only species that are able to activate their fight or flight stress response system through thought alone. So you don't need a big brown bear to be charging you for your fight or flight stress response system to be activated. You could just be sitting at home and have the thought that, oh, I have a deadline at work, and your mind then starts racing, right? And what happens in the physical body when our stress response system is activated? Blood leaves the smaller muscle groups and moves to the larger muscle groups so that we can actually take flight. So that's why you experience a tingling sensation in your hands and feet. The body releases cortisol and adrenaline into the system. Your heart starts racing. Your breathing becomes deeper. Your digestive system shuts down. Now, this is an important one because the digestive system uses up 30 to 40% of your energy. And so when you go into fight or flight stress mode, your body's not thinking about how it needs to digest food because you might just become the bear's food. So your body's not worried about that. Your body's worried about survival in that moment. And so it shuts the digestive system down. It shuts ovaries down in women. It shuts the growth hormone down. And so can you imagine that if you are in fight or flight stress response system mode for more days than not, for weeks on end, how that starts impacting your physical body? So let's just keep that in mind and just remember that. And through this talk, I'm going to be sharing with you how to deactivate the stress response system and how to activate your rest and digest system. So that's what's happening in the body. What's happening in the brain? And I want to use Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain to explain to you a bit more about what's going on in the brain when we go into a stress response. Okay, so Dan Siegel is a clinical professor from UCLA, and he came up with the hand model of the brain. And what he explains is that this part of the brain is this part, which is our frontal lobe, which is responsible for executive functioning, decision making, emotional regulation, reasoning. This part over here is the brainstem. This part here, your thumb, is the amygdala, which is the tiny almond-like structure in the brain, which is part of the limbic system, which is the center of our emotions. Now, when you are experiencing stress and you hear very difficult news, or you are in shock, or you have a big brown bear charging you, you are going to flip your lid. So this is the term that he uses. So you flip your lid and your higher order thinking goes offline and your amygdala takes over. And we often refer to it as an amygdala hijacking, where you cannot think straight. Has that ever happened to you guys? Where you are in a flat spin, you can't think straight because your higher order thinking has gone offline. And Dan Siegel refers to this as flipping your lid. So even when you are in an argument with your partner or your spouse and it's getting very heated, you can just do the hand signal to each other to say, okay, you flipped your lid. We need a 30 minutes break from each other, and then we will come back when our higher order thinking is back online. So through this talk, I'm going to be sharing with you ways in which to bring this higher order thinking back online. Now, let's just have a look at the signs and symptoms of anxiety. And I'm going to walk you through some of these signs and symptoms. On a psychological front, if you experience catastrophic thinking, and what is that? That's worst case scenario, always going to the worst case. What if this happens? What if that happens? And the anxiety can spiral out of control and you start feeling anxious about the fact that you're anxious. Then what we have are behavioral symptoms, restlessness behavior, controlling behavior. Believe it or not, people who are very controlling are actually very anxious people. So the micromanagers and the control freaks, beneath that behavior is a very anxious person who is struggling to cope with what is happening in his or her environment, so they try to control you, and that makes them feel better about themselves. So we also see sleeping difficulties, inability to fall asleep or staying up throughout the night. We see emotional difficulties, that people who are actually quite anxious may present with an irritable mood, okay, or feeling overwhelmed or feeling helpless, hopeless. All right. Then we have cognitive difficulties. These individuals may have difficulty focusing. They may zone out when you are busy speaking with them because they're thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow or what happened yesterday. So they're not in the moment with you. And then there may be mind racing, overthinking, inability to shut off from those thoughts that you're having on a constant basis. So there's that overthinking, there's memory difficulties, forgetfulness. So these are some of the symptoms that you may see showing up in a person who is struggling with anxiety. And then also to know that there need to be a cluster of symptoms present over a period of time, which need to be causing clinical significant impairment in this person's day-to-day functioning in order for a diagnosis of clinical anxiety to be made. So please don't be self-diagnosing yourselves here. If you do have concerns and if you are relating to some of the symptoms mentioned above, I ask that you rather consult with a mental health care professional and do not go onto Google, because Dr. Google is notorious for making us stress even more. So rather get it clarified with a mental health care professional. So these are some of the symptoms. Now, how do we cope with anxiety? The first thing I want to share with you guys is how you can go about dealing with a panic attack. And I'm sure you know of someone who has experienced a panic attack, because if we think about the prevalence of mental health difficulties, the World Health Organization explains that 1 in 4 people are struggling with a mental health difficulty. I would say that those figures have doubled since the onset of the pandemic, and they have even, research has shown that cyberbullying has increased by 70%, 70%, okay? So if someone is struggling with a panic attack, the first thing you need to be aware of are the signs. So what are the signs of a panic attack? And the hallmark symptom of a panic attack is that it can occur out of nowhere. You don't need a trigger to experience a panic attack, okay? So, and it can last anywhere between 10 minutes to an hour. And so the symptoms to be on the lookout for are heart palpitations, difficulty breathing, chest pain, nausea, palms that are sweating, feeling like you are going crazy, feeling like you are just completely out of your body and really struggling and having thoughts that I might die because my heart is racing so fast, something might happen to me. Okay, so what we would suggest doing in a time like that is to engage in comforting self-talk, to be able to say to yourself, I am experiencing a panic attack right now. I am safe. This is not dangerous, and I will get through this, right? And then looking at doing some breathing exercises. Now, what I will say about a panic attack and the nature of a panic attack is that it is going to ride its course. But just you knowing that you are taking control in some shape or form is going to help you feel better. So what I could suggest doing is practicing 4-7-8 breathing. Now, what is 4-7-8 breathing? It is breathing in through your nose for 4 seconds, holding for 7 seconds, and exhaling through your mouth for 8 seconds. Now, what this does is it activates the parasympathetic rest and digest system. So 4-7-8 breathing is something that you can do. Then what we also want to start doing more of is self-soothing. And I think it's the greatest gift you can give to yourself if you are able to self-soothe. Because there will be times in your life where you cannot reach your loved one or your best friend or your integrity partner, and you cannot get an appointment with your therapist. And so you're going to need to learn how to self-soothe in those moments. And so one way of doing this is through the body and paying attention to the body, limiting your caffeine intake, because we know that caffeine and anxiety are very good friends. They love hanging out together. So if you are already prone to experiencing anxiety and you are drinking cups of coffee during the day or Red Bull or any of those high energy drinks, it may exacerbate your symptoms of anxiety. So to be aware of that, and then to drink chamomile tea to make sure that you are getting your 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, because we know that anything less than 7 hours of sleep is considered sleep deprivation. And we also know that if you are not getting your 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, you are waking up with a 60% more reactive amygdala, right? 60. So you're waking up and your lid is already a bit flipped. And we know what happens then. We know that when our lids are already a bit flipped, that it's not going to take much for us to completely flip our lids. And don't think that children are the only ones who throw tantrums when they haven't had a good night's sleep. Small people, small tantrums. Big people, big tantrums. So let's just remember that. And then we also want to look at exercising, because we know when we are moving our bodies, we are also moving emotion, because emotion is energy in motion. Okay? So getting your 30 minutes of exercise 3 to 4 times a week, because what we also know is that it's very healthy for the brain. When you are exercising, it actually releases and increases BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is a little protein in the brain that helps with us generating new brain cells. It helps with us retaining information. So yes, exercise can make you smarter, according to Harvard professor John Ratey. Now, that's on the body side, and also to remember that a healthy diet brings about a healthy mind. So a healthy body is a healthy mind, and that your gut is where 90% of serotonin is formed, in the gut. And serotonin is the happy chemical that we find in antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication. So make sure that you are eating healthy, unprocessed foods, because if you're eating food that has a shelf life of 7 years, you're going to feel that way, right? So eating food that has been alive is very important. Then on the mind front, you want to limit digital distractions. You want to make sure that you have time where you can quieten the mind, where you can engage in meditation practices, where you can journal, just tech-free activities. And doing mantras can also be helpful. And then on the soul front, what we can say is that you want to think about your meditation, about about engaging in some introspection, and also having periods where you can be creative. And we know that boredom precedes creativity. And so spending time off your phone may help with that. And remember to engage in play. Yes, you guys heard me correctly. When was the last time you engaged in play? When was the last time you were playful? And society almost disregards play for adults. It's seen as something that is a waste of time. But in actual fact, play keeps our brains agile. Play helps with us being more flexible in our day-to-day lives. Because if you think about what happens when you're playing hide-and-go-seek with your 5-year-old, you've got to be flexible and think on your feet. Where am I going to go hide now? What am I going to do next? And you translate that into the real life, and you can see how we will be more flexible with our days. And if we can approach our days with a playful spirit, that we're not going to be so rigid about, but this didn't work out. And an example of this is, let's say your standard order when you go to Starbucks is an iced latte with coconut milk. And you go to Starbucks that day and you order your iced latte with coconut milk, and the barista says to you, sorry, we are out of coconut milk. Now, if you don't have a playful spirit, you may want to lodge a complaint against Starbucks, all right? But if you have a playful spirit, you will be able to think, well, what else can I be ordering on this menu? I haven't tried the almond milk or the oat milk, or what about if I try a Frizzocino? I've never tried that. And so being playful with your days means that we're going to be more flexible. So then what I also want to say, and something that I often share with my clients, is focus on things that are within your control. Think about 2 circles. The one circle is things that are within our control, and another circle are things that are not within our control. But we sometimes tend to focus on things that are not within our control. Like, what if it rains this weekend and I have a birthday? Or, I wonder what's going to happen with the stock exchange. Or, I'm not sure how they're going to rate my interview. These things are not within your control. And when you focus on these things, you end up feeling helpless, hopeless, and even more anxious. But when you focus on what is within your control, you are going to feel like you're more in your power. And the first thing that I would suggest focusing on is your physical body. Having a bottom-up approach to dealing with anxiety. Focus on your physical body because that is within your control. Okay, so that's focusing on things that are within our control. Then, making time for conscious connections. Finding your tribe of like-minded people. We know that relationships are the greatest predictor of happiness. And there was a 75-year study done on this, and you guys can go Google that. You can go Google the Harvard Grant study. There was a 75-year study done on how having deep, meaningful relationships in life contributes to our overall happiness and well-being. And so relationships are the greatest mitigator against stress. So focusing on who you are spending time with as well. Has it ever happened to you guys that you go out for coffee with a friend and you're sitting at this coffee date and you notice how negative your friend is being? Your friend is complaining about the food, complaining about the service, complaining about their spouse, is being very, very critical of themselves, being critical of you. And you find yourself leaving that coffee date feeling more drained than what you did when you arrived. Has that ever happened to you guys? Right? And then, in contrast, let's say you go for lunch with a friend and you're sitting at that lunch and you just start feeling inspired and excited, and you leave that lunch with more energy than what you arrived at that lunch with, feeling more positive than you did before. Now, there is no coincidence for this, guys. It is known as the emotional contagion theory. So emotional contagion is a psychological phenomenon whereby human beings are able to transfer emotion in any given environment non-verbally. And so you could just be sitting with someone in a room and they flip their lid and you start picking up on that negative energy, right? Or you start mimicking the behavior of the other person. And this is because we have mirror neurons in the brain, which are known as smart cells, which can pick up on the emotion of the other person, and then we feel it ourselves. And research has also shown that it takes a leader 7 minutes to change the mood of a room that they're in. So just being aware how you can influence another and how another can influence you. And setting boundaries with people, having the ability to say no to things that you don't have time for. Because you need to remember that if you say yes to this, you are saying no to that. If I say yes to watching another episode of Seinfeld on Netflix at 10 p.m. in the evening, true story, that means I'm saying no to waking up at 6 a.m. to go for that run. If I say yes to taking on another project at work, that means I'm saying no to spending dinner with my family. So everything that you say yes to, you're going to be saying no to something else. I just had someone comment that they love Seinfeld. So do I. I'm so glad to see there's someone else over here that loves Seinfeld. Right, so just remembering that. And then one thing that I can also suggest here is to look at observing people's behaviors rather than absorbing people's behaviors. So observe when your friend is being negative, but don't absorb when your friend is being negative. And when you go into those interactions, imagine you've got this gold shield around your body and that their negative words are just deflecting off your shield. Right? And there is a observe, don't absorb technique online that you can go and have a look at, that a psychologist had invented himself. So a very, very good technique there. And then as far as the physical body goes as well, I want to share with you guys a bit about Vargas Nerve healing. Now, I don't know if any of you have come across people jumping into ice baths, right? On Instagram, this craze where people are climbing into ice baths, or they are going and doing cryotherapy where they are in this chamber that is minus 110 degrees Celsius. Have you guys come across this craze? So I want to share a bit about why people are doing this. Now, the vagus nerve is the second largest nerve in the body. It connects from the base of the brain to all vital organs in the body, like the heart, the liver, the gut, the kidneys. And the vagus nerve is the power battery for the rest and digest system, which is our parasympathetic nervous system. So when we have low vagal tone, it's associated with anxiety, depression, and inflammation in the body. So how do we increase our vagal tone? By taking ice baths, right? By taking cold showers. Because when we take a cold shower, it activates the parasympathetic rest and digest system. Now, you can do it that way, or you can engage in humming. Believe it or not, when you hum or when you chant the word Om, it is linked to the vocal cords, and the vocal cords are linked to the vagus nerve. So when you chant Om, not only is it the frequency of the universe and it's very calming to chant it, but it actually activates the vagus nerve. So you could hum, you could sing, but if your singing is anything like mine, I'm going to suggest that you rather sing when you take that cold shower, because otherwise your family is not going to be very impressed with you. So that's another way to activate the vagus nerve, or to engage in meditation. So we want to increase our vagal tone. And then another thing that I would suggest doing is becoming a gentle observer of your thoughts. You know, I was seeing a healer about 4 years ago, and she said something that was very profound to me at the time. She said to me, Christine, you are not your thoughts. And I was like, but what do you mean I'm not my thoughts? They're in my head, and my head is attached to my body, so I don't understand. And she said, no, there is you, and then there are the thoughts that you think. Just like there is you, and then there are the images that you have in your mind. And so create some distance between you and the thoughts that you think. Because we're thinking over 60,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of the thoughts you thought yesterday, you'll think today, and you'll think tomorrow again. So as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, we need to look at breaking the habit of being ourselves. So you need to catch yourself when you are in that mode of overthinking. And how can we do that? By creating some distance between you and the thoughts that you think. So what I want to do with you guys now is I want you all to close your eyes for me. Okay? Close your eyes, and I want you to imagine that 2 meters in front of you stands a tall giraffe. Okay, so imagine that 2 meters in front of you is this image of a tall giraffe. Can you all see it in your third eye? Okay. Then I want you to imagine that to the right of this tall giraffe lies a red soccer ball. Can you all see this red Coca-Cola soccer ball? Okay. And then to the left of this tall giraffe is a willow tree. Okay, so we've got the tall giraffe, we've got a red soccer ball, and we've got a willow tree. And all of a sudden, this tall giraffe starts playing soccer, and he's busy doing tricks with a red soccer ball. Can we all see that? It's 2 meters in front of us. Okay. Now I want you to imagine that 2 meters in front of you is a thought bubble. And this thought bubble is, what if I can't travel this weekend? And then there is another thought bubble 2 meters away from you, and it's, what if I test positive and I can't attend that conference? And then there is another thought bubble 2 meters in front of you, and it's, I wonder what we should have for dinner tonight. Okay? Now I want you guys to open your eyes, and what I just did was I wanted to explain to you guys how, just like we can create distance between us and the images that we have in our minds, so can we create distance between us and the thoughts that we have in our minds. And this is known as cognitive diffusion, where we are not fused with our thoughts. Because what happens is, we think a thought, we think, what if I test positive and I can't attend that conference? And then we actually start thinking that that thought is real. And we start believing that we're going to test positive and won't be able to attend that conference. And then we start feeling anxious. So we are very fused with our thoughts. And so I'm saying, practice cognitive diffusion, create distance between you and the thoughts that you think, and just know that they are just thoughts. And a way of creating distance is to preface your thoughts with, I see someone just said that their giraffe is still playing football. Okay, so you can see the image in front of you. Great. Now preface your thoughts with, I'm having the thought that, what if I test positive and I won't be able to attend that conference? And then you end it off with, and that's just a thought. Or I'm having the thought that, what if he is upset with me because I didn't invite him to my birthday lunch? And that is just a thought. So you need to remind yourself that your brain is super creative and it thinks a lot of thoughts in a day, and you don't need to latch on to every single thought, because what you feed will grow. Okay? Neuroanatomist Jill Bolt-Taylor explains how emotions only have a 90-second lifespan. They come and they go. But why do they stay longer? Because we feed them a story. So instead of just experiencing anxiety and saying, right now, I'm feeling anxious, we take it a step further and we feed the feeling with, and I'm feeling anxious because this might happen and that happened yesterday and what if this happens? And so we start becoming anxious about the fact that we are anxious. And we need to understand that we all have a relationship with anxiety. And it's important that we are able to be the ones that are controlling that relationship. That if we think about us doing a dance with anxiety, that you are leading in the tango and that anxiety is not leading in that tango. Okay? So, and a way of doing that is to be a gentle observer of the thoughts that you're thinking. Create some distance between you and the thoughts. And a very good way of doing this is through meditation. So the more you strengthen your meditation muscle, the more you will be able to create that distance between you and the thoughts that you think. And you will be less reactive in life. Because what happens in meditation? I may be sitting down and I'm meditating and I experience a feeling of irritation come up. I don't get up during the meditation. I just notice that right now I'm feeling irritated and I wish this meditation would end. But I don't get up. I allow myself to move through that emotion. Now, translate that to the real world. Let's say you're sitting in a boardroom with your senior colleague and you start feeling irritated by what she is saying. You can sit with it because you've learned to sit with it in meditation. You don't react in that moment. You can sit with it, you can process it, you can say, I'm feeling anxious right now or I'm feeling irritated right now. And you will be more responsive and less reactive because reaction is a knee-jerk reaction. Response is something that takes some time and it is grounded in our values. So we need to look at noticing when we are experiencing something and name it to tame it. So as I mentioned earlier, Dan Siegel, the clinical professor, came up with the term flip your lid, but he also came up with a term known as name it to tame it. And what he explains is that when you name the emotion that you are experiencing, it actually sends soothing neurotransmitters from the higher regions of the brain to the limbic brain, and it calms the system down. So even with parents who are trying to regulate their child's emotions, if your child has flipped their lid and they're very angry about something or they're very worried about something, it helps for the parent to label the emotion that the child is experiencing because it helps the child move through that emotion with more ease. So for the parent to say, I can see you feeling quite angry right now, or I can see you feeling quite worried right now. So as you name the emotion that the child is experiencing, it helps the different regions of the brain connect, okay? And the higher order thinking can come back online then. So I would suggest naming the emotion, but in order to name the emotion, you also need to have a rich emotional vocabulary. So a way of broadening your emotional vocabulary could be through downloading the feelings wheel of Google, because there are hundreds of different emotions. And by us having a richer emotional vocabulary, we can also increase our emotional granularity. And what is emotional granularity? It is being able to tell the difference between two feelings that seem quite similar. Being able to differentiate between feeling irritated versus frustrated, or feeling sad versus, let's say, depressed, or feeling furious versus upset, or embarrassed versus shy. So being able to tell the difference between those feelings. And something I didn't mention earlier is that I'm the creator of a children's board game named Smart Heart, which aims at facilitating emotional intelligence in kids. And in this game, there are 50 different feelings to be able to start differentiating between what it is that you're feeling when, and start practicing I feel when, using I language when you are trying to express your feelings. So to be able to say, I feel anxious when I don't know what is going to happen next, right? So being able to name the emotion and tame it. And then last but not least, when in doubt, I would suggest distracting yourself. And now what I will say about distraction is that there is a thing called healthy distraction. And I'm not saying that we must always distract ourselves from the anxiety, because we also need to face it. We need to sit with it. But at times you can also learn ways to move yourself out of that physical space. And so if you are feeling overwhelmed and you're sitting at your desk, get up and go and take a walk outside, or go and make yourself a cup of tea. Or another way of distracting yourself, and I've found this to be really, really useful, is playing Wordle. Okay, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the game Wordle, but when I'm sitting and I'm trying to figure out what the 5-letter word is of the day, I'm only focusing on what the 5-letter word of the day is. So it's a very mindful practice. So mindfulness is something that if we can really strengthen our mindfulness muscle, it brings us back to the present moment, which is the only moment we have. And I actually had someone model that to me earlier this week. I had taken a Kareem drive to Expo, and when my Kareem driver dropped me off at Expo, he was kind enough to wait for the program coordinator to come and collect me. And so I sat in the car with this Kareem driver, and what I noticed was that he was busy sketching a drawing while he was waiting. He wasn't on his phone, but he was sketching a drawing. And I looked at this drawing and I said, wow, I said, do you sketch often? And he said, yes. I find that when I'm sketching, I'm not thinking about anything. He said, I don't like going on social media and I don't like going on WhatsApp, but when I sketch, I actually feel freedom. And it was a good reminder of how we can all keep a notepad and a pencil in our bags, or we can find something that is tech-free to also distract ourselves. So these are just some of the tips that I can share with you here today. I can see that some questions have been asked in the chat. I am going to go back now and see what questions I can take now. So if you do have any questions around how to cope with anxiety and what it is that you can do going forward, please feel free to pop your questions in the comment section now, and I will address them as we go along. So I'm just going to scroll down again and see if any questions have come through. Okay, what is the name of the game? So the name of the board game that I mentioned earlier is Smart Heart Board Game, and you can find them on Instagram at Smart Heart Board Game. Right. Are we aware when we're distracting ourselves? So I think that when you are overwhelmed with a lot of things and you are multitasking, which many of us like to do, that there is going to be less awareness. And so watch yourselves. Start watching yourselves in the day. Start moving away from technology and your phone, and that will also help with increasing your awareness to know that right now I'm distracting myself, and to know that right now I'm engaging in a numbing behavior because I don't want to face what I need to face. And numbing behaviors may be endless scrolling through Instagram, or binge watching episodes on Netflix. These are some numbing behaviors. And what I would then also recommend is insight-oriented therapy. I'm a firm believer in therapy, not only because I am a therapist, but because I have my own therapist, and he's based in Seattle, and I meet with him every 2 to 3 weeks online. And I find that no one's going to hold up a mirror as well as your therapist will, or as well as a dear friend will, who is willing to be honest with you and is willing to help you grow. So therapy can also help with creating more awareness, and journaling, engaging in a journaling practice. Okay, I'm having a look here to see if any other questions have come through while we've been speaking. So if you just give me a moment. So if you have asked a question earlier, if you don't mind resending it again, because it's quite difficult to see who's asked what. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them now. So for the method of dealing with a panic attack, sometimes it's so intense that you can't control yourself to even catch your breath. What to do when there's no one around to reach out. That can be very difficult. And sometimes you are just so overwhelmed that you're not even thinking of, okay, now I must breathe, or now I must do this, or now I must do that. So when there is no one around, this is where self-soothing is critical. And it's about building a muscle of self-soothing. It's not something that happens overnight. It's something that you're going to need to cultivate. And so having reminders, visual reminders around the house, on your phone, that maybe are saying, I am safe, I'm going to work through this, I am okay, this too shall pass, right? Or just saying to yourself, right now I am feeling panicked. Right now I am feeling anxious. So if you can remember one thing today, I would suggest remembering the name it to tame it method, where if you do start feeling anxious and you are experiencing a panic attack, just name it, because that can also help with you moving through it. And if you can remember to practice the 4-7-8 breathing during that time, or even the elevator breath, where you imagine that your body is a tall building, not very difficult to do in Dubai, and you have an elevator in your chest, and when you breathe in through your nose, the elevator moves all the way to the top of your throat. When you breathe out through your mouth, the elevator goes all the way to the bottom of your stomach. And this is a great technique to teach kids as well, by the way. Right. So I haven't seen any more questions come through. Oh, I see one here. How do I stop overthinking? So I know that there is this technique of thought stopping, and we've all maybe come across the thought stopping technique, where you put a rubber band on your arm, and every time you have that thought, you snap the band, and hopefully that helps you to stop thinking the thought. But they actually find that it isn't very helpful. Imagine if I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant. Well, what did you just do? You all just thought of a pink elephant. I know you did. So instead of trying to push the thought away, it is better to be a conscious observer and a gentle observer of the thought that you're thinking. So again, to create some distancing between you and all of these thoughts that you're thinking. And what I can also recommend is that you do a mind dump, which is when you are having all of these thoughts, put them down on paper, that these are the things that I'm worrying about. And what you will find is that there may only be 2 to 3 things that you're worrying about, but they just keep looping in your head, and it seems like there are 90 things that I'm worrying about. So do a mind dump when you're overthinking something. Create some distance between you and the thoughts. Remember the technique of the giraffe and the red ball. Okay? So create that distance, and remember that I am not my thoughts. These are just thoughts. Okay? So that's a way of helping with the overthinking. And again, if I can say it again, meditation also helps with this. Okay. So we are coming towards the end of our session today. Oh, I see another question. During busy work hours, how long should we take breaks, and how long do you recommend? I think it is important to take breaks on the hour. So if you're going to sit down and do some work, that you dedicate 45 minutes, let's say, to sit down and do a task, and then taking a 10 to 15 minute break. But when you sit down and you do the task for 45 minutes, try and put your phone away. Because what is happening at the moment is our attention is being fragmented because we are constantly checking our phone. And if you have notifications on your phone, I'm going to challenge you today to turn off your WhatsApp notifications, to turn off your email notifications. Ever since watching the Netflix documentary Social Dilemma, I realized how important it is to turn off your notifications. And the reason for this is if you're sitting down and you're trying to do a task at work and your notifications are on, I don't know about you guys, but my family groups are buzzing every 15 seconds. And so you've got this thing buzzing every 15 seconds. How are you going to focus on what you need to focus on? And they have found that multitasking actually costs us 40% of our productivity, 40%. So when you sit down for those 45 minutes, make sure that all window tabs are closed, that your phone is in your bag, and that you're sitting down and doing what you need to be doing in that moment. And so taking breaks at work, moving your body, get up, go and fill your water bottle, 2 to 3 liters of water a day. Make sure that you're staying hydrated, and leave your office desk and then come back again. And especially when you're sitting and you're grappling with something and you can't solve a problem, or you're struggling to be creative, move away from that task, because our ideas often come to us when we are out in nature or when we've moved away and we've taken a bit of downtime. Okay, right, let's see if we can take another question. I read that writing gives words power, as if you are giving them a documentation to stay forever and stuck to eternity. So, yes. So when you write things down, let's say you write down what your worries are, what you can also do then is once you've written them out, you can take the paper and you can tear it up and you can throw it away. Or some people recommend burning the paper, but please don't do that and then need to call the fire department. So I'm not recommending that you sit and burn paper, but these are some ways that we can take that negative energy and tear it up and throw it away, right? So we're doing that mind dump, but we're getting it out of our heads. And if you do want to start manifesting things, remember that your words do hold a lot of power, and whatever follows I am is going to come looking for you. So if you are saying I am tired, more fatigue will come looking for you. If you say I'm stressed, more stresses will come looking for you. If you say I am fat, more calories will come looking for you. So be aware of your spoken word, because if you change your language, you also change your frequency. And so focus on the positive, journal about the positive things, journal about things that you want to manifest. I am a calm person. I face life's challenges with ease. I am in a creative space, right? So think about all the things you do want. And if you guys are interested, I'm going to be running a vision board workshop for adults on February 13th and February 20th. It's a Sunday from 10 a.m. till 12 p.m., where I will be sharing with you how to create your vision board and how important words are when it comes to manifesting things in our lives, and how your visions need to be linked to your values. So if you'd like to find out more about that, you can follow us at Lighthouse Arabia to learn more about the Value 2022 workshop that's coming up. Right, I've been asked if we can share the accounts. So we have 5 different accounts at Lighthouse Arabia. We have at Lighthouse Arabia, which is our main account, where we share pertinent, relevant information around mental health and well-being. We have our at Dr. Salia Afridi account. And Dr. Salia Afridi is our managing director and a clinical psychologist at Lighthouse Arabia. And she walks adults through their own transformational journey and journey through personal growth. So you can have a look at her page. And then we have 2 pages for parents at Light-Hearted Parenting, which focuses on authentically attuned parenting and giving you tips and tools in dealing with your children. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have the at Smart Heart board game page, which focuses on cultivating emotional intelligence in kids. And then we have our at Lighthouse Insight page for our youth. And we also have a TikTok page at Lighthouse Arabia. So feel free to follow us over there. And if you guys have any questions for me after this session, please feel free to DM me on one of those platforms and I will respond. Right. So this brings us towards the end of our session. Thank you so much for all attending and for your active participation, and I wish you all a beautiful week further. Take care. Bye-bye.